This is the Zero S. It's an electric motorbike that's CBT legal, but do not confuse it for being a petrol 125 equivalent. We'll come back onto that in a little while, but it's way, way faster than that. I've been riding the Zero S for about a year now, and I use it for my daily commute from Surrey up to northwest London. It's a 52-mile round trip, a lot of heavy traffic, and a few dual carriageways in between. The bike originally came with a very odd whale tail arrangement for the number plate and rear tail light assembly. I've replaced this with an R&G Racing tail tidy, which I think gives it a much more pert backside. But I'll leave it up to you to decide. Anyway, enough of me talking about the bike. Let's get on it and go for a ride.
It's an 11 kilowatt motor. Well, it isn't, but we'll come back onto that in a minute. It has a 14.4 kilowatt hour battery that, for city riding, is stated as being good for up to 180 miles. So there's your first question answered. What's its range? It's CBT legal, and I think there's a big caveat that we need to put on CBT legal. CBT legal is for bikes up to 125cc, and they should be limited to 11 kilowatts or 15 brake horsepower, which seems reasonable, other than the fact that this produces a peak power of 59 brake horsepower, so 4 times the amount that a CBT legal bike is allowed to produce. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, how is that legal? And the answer is, it's legal on a technicality, and it's nothing more. The technicality that I'm talking about is that when you measure the performance of an electric motorbike, it's taken from a point of view of the fact that it is the peak horsepower as a continuous horsepower over a 30-minute period. And the zero over a 30-minute period would produce a peak power of 11 kilowatts. But you don't use peak power continuously when you're riding a motorbike. Well, not unless you're thrashing it on a motorway or you're on a racetrack. And quite frankly, if you took one of these onto a track day, you'd be embarrassed. So the situation is, what you're talking about here is you have 59 brake horsepower on tap pretty much whenever you want it, because you're continuously accelerating, decelerating, cruising along, going with the traffic. But you do have 59 brake horsepower there, and it is extraordinarily fast for a 125. And what do I mean by extraordinarily fast? Well, a 0 to 60 for most of the quicker 125 bikes, the Aprilia or the MT125, would be somewhere in the region of about 12-13 seconds 0 to 60. This does it in about 4.5 seconds. Some people claim even quicker than that, but 3.9 or something. But I don't have any data to shed any light on it. I don't have sophisticated timing equipment for doing 0 to 60s. But what I can say is it is phenomenally fast for a CBT legal bike. Comfortably under 6 seconds 0 to 60. So it is so much quicker than anything else you can ride on a CBT license. It's absolutely insane. And when I say anything you can ride on a CBT license, I'm not including other zeros, because there are other zeros in the range that are CBT legal. The funny thing is that with the CBT legal bikes, they're also sold alongside, or can be sold alongside, bikes that are A2 licensed rather than 125 licenses, which don't have the restriction on power for the continuous power and produce the same, if not marginally. And when I say marginally, you're talking 1 or 2 brake horsepower more but the performance doesn't dip off. Other road testers have taken out the bikes back to back and said they really cannot tell any difference between the CBT legal and the normal one. Maybe there's a tiny bit more power, but it's insignificant. So what you're talking about here is effectively a bike that produces 4 times the power of a standard 125 that's perfectly legal to ride on an L plate. That's half the story, because when you're talking about performance and you're talking about brake horsepower, the other equation is torque. How much torque does the bike produce? And the answer to that for this particular bike is it produces more torque than a Ducati 950 Supersport. I'm going to just say that again and let it sink in. It produces more torque than a Ducati 950 Supersport. And that torque isn't available as a peak torque. That is torque that's available right the way throughout your sort of range of power. So when you open up the throttle at standstill, you don't get, the software is written so that you don't get the peak torque immediately from a standstill to stop the inevitable bike dropping and flipping the bike. But once you're on the go, from about 15 miles an hour onwards, you're going to get a build-up of torque that is just like, it's turbine smooth. There's no way to describe it really unless you've ridden one. It just comes wave after wave after wave of torque, and you're just riding on this crest of torque that fires you forwards. It's just like warp speed, without having to change gear and feed in the clutch. It just catapults you forwards. It's completely addictive, I have to say, completely addictive. So you've got all this torque, you've got all this power, and if I have to say the biggest criticism of the Zero is that you've got all this torque available to you, but no traction control. And it has different settings. So you can have an eco setting, you've got a custom setting the way you can set how much torque and top speed and regenerative braking you want. And then you have the sport, which most people automatically want to put it into sport and see how fast it goes, and you don't get any regenerative braking. But ultimately, without the traction control there and the cold, wet winter mornings riding to work, you have to be pretty careful with what you're doing with the throttle, because it is easy to spin up the wheels and get it to slip. And quite a few motor journalists have been caught out by doing exactly that. I have as well, I'll be the first to admit. And once the rear wheel loses traction, it loses it big time because of all the torque that you've got. So it's not much fun, and it is a criticism that I would level at the bike. The bike's been around for quite a few years now, and whether they'll actually produce a replacement for it or not, who knows, but they haven't felt the need to replace it with anything that has traction control. The bigger bikes, the more powerful bikes, do have it as standard for obvious reasons, but this one, no. So other criticisms. Well, I'm 5'8", and I struggle to put both feet down on the ground. Depending on the camber of the road, it's not too bad, or it can be quite difficult. And there you are. That's the torque and power of the bike for a CBT legal. It's just bonkers. But anyway, yeah, the seat is quite high, and I would say anyone sort of 5'6" or under is going to struggle with that. At 5'8", it's not a problem. I can put both feet down, but one foot will have to be on sort of tiptoe. The other one, depending on the camber of the road, I can put flat down, or that'll have to be on tiptoe as well. So The bike comes with shockingly bad headlights. The first thing I did was replace them with an LED replacement bulb to improve the night vision that you get whilst riding the bike. But the other thing that is also pretty poor is the horn, which you get a sort of pop pop horn. I've fitted it with a straightforward replacement of a Denali sound bomb, which makes a huge difference and doesn't half give some motorists shocks when they're starting to do stupid things in front of you. So there really aren't that many other things that I can criticise the bike about. It's a great commuter bike, as I've already said. I'm getting in custom mode. I'm getting a range of somewhere in the region of 160 miles on a full charge, which is fine. People are always going to go on about range anxiety. I'm not using the bike to commute any further than across from Surrey down to up to northwest London. So it's about a 26-mile journey there, 26-mile journey back, so 52-mile round trip. And I can do 3 journeys on a tank or full charge without too much trouble. But I'm not using the bike for travelling long distances on the motorway. And that's one of the big Achilles heels of the bike, is that if you are looking at using it for doing that, you're going to be disappointed, because you're only going to get somewhere in the region of about 100 miles at motorway speeds. You might get a little bit more, you might get a little bit less. It's up to you how you're riding the bike, I suppose. Goodness me. It's up to you how you're riding the bike.